Every business has a logo, and when it's yours, it matters. GPS is a 30-year local Las Vegas company that produces custom merch, like hats and apparel, drinkware and totes, blankets and bandanas, really any kind of swag you can imagine that features your logo or message. They're experts at finding or creating the right products for the season and the reason that fit your budget and timeline. Check out the GPS website at gpslasvegas.com, where there's a world of products to promote your brand. Could more movies be made in Nevada? Sony and Warner Brothers think so, and are both courting a sweet tax break in the state. Today on CityCast Las Vegas, I talk with Nevada current editor April Corbin-Gurnis about the latest iteration of a proposed film tax credit bill and if it could help Las Vegas become the next Hollywood. It's Tuesday, September 24th. I'm Sarah Lohman, and here's what Las Vegas is talking about. April, what would be the benefit for Las Vegas if more films were shot here?
Oh, I guess it depends on who you ask, right? There's an economic benefit is the argument. That's why we're here and why we're talking about sort of tax break programs is that they think it will diversify our economy beyond, obviously, Las Vegas and the Strip and gaming and entertainment. TVs and movies are also entertainment, but they're a different kind of entertainment. They work sort of on a different economic cycle, which means they would have jobs. So there are people at studios, obviously, who do lighting and who do stage and who do productions, and in addition to on it, like talent and actors and directors and stuff like that. So the idea is that we could make hundreds of $millions of movies, and that will help stimulate the economy. That's kind of the argument.
And that there's already an embedded workforce here that does lighting, that does sound, that does production, and so could be sort of converted into movie production.
Correct. That's the idea. I mean, we have so many stage shows here and all of those, wonderful people who do the lighting and do sound. And we have obviously a huge convention scene here. So again, that's a lot of people who understand how to set up temporary stages and sets and different kind of AV requirements and stuff in different spaces. So all of that, they say, is sort of a good base to build off of. We would still need to add a lot of people, I think, to that is the argument, which, is a boon in terms of benefiting people and helping them. That's the idea.
So our population would also increase in theory if this industry came here.
That's, I mean, theoretically, yeah. I mean, we're still growing anyway, but I think that is one of it. In terms of the base, obviously. I think one of the arguments you could make about this project is that there are probably people in California who are working in these fields who would love to go to somewhere cheaper. So as much as like you and I, as Nevadans who live here, might look at this environment right now and be like, it's getting really expensive and things are really higher. We're obviously still better than a lot of places in California. So those people, might be tempted to move here and sort of have a better life because it'll be cheaper than where they're currently living.
So in terms of the film industry, some of the benefits are embedded workforce, but also that people can move here, work in the film industry, and have a cheaper cost of living, essentially.
Yeah, and one of the things, there is that, but also in equal measure, and this is actually something that the Sony CEO has said on stage publicly to a bunch of Nevadans, is that a lot of people in the film industry would like to have a studio here versus somewhere like Atlanta or somewhere else because they can go home to LA on the weekends. So they could do a Monday to Friday job and then go back to where they actually live full time, which, isn't the best selling point, I think, for a lot of Nevadans. They kind of look at that and be like, wow. But that is one of the appeals to people who live in Hollywood and have to work, is that this is a lot easier to get to than, say, a place like Atlanta or New Jersey or one of those states that's also, embraced film tax credits.
Yeah, I mean, as it's not a selling point for us, but as someone who often travels across the coast, that's a rough flight, especially going to. So the difference between like a 5-hour red eye and a 60-minute flight to LA is pretty substantial. Actually, speaking of Georgia, I feel like starting way back at The Walking Dead, I started to notice that so many TV shows and movies were being filmed in Georgia. So how did that happen? And is that what Nevada is going for?
It is somewhat similar, and it's definitely a parallel. The reason that we know of Georgia as sort of a movie haven outside of LA, and I was a fan of The Walking Dead until they killed Rick Grimes, so I know too that I was a big fan of that. But is that they made a film tax credit program that was really popular and sort of exploded that industry. That growth there was because of legislative involvement and investment in a film tax credit program. That is similar to what Nevada is trying to do now, except the difference is with the current proposals that are being floated is that ours are tied to a physical movie studio, or 2 studios perhaps. So those would be actual sound stages, actual permanent structures that are built.
As just like on-site zombies in the woods. Okay.
Exactly. So Atlanta and all of those, and really everywhere else in the country that does film tax credit, it works on that on set-by-set basis, and it's all on scene and stuff. So they're using spaces. It's temporary and not permanent. Sony and Warner Brothers are both attempting to build full studios here.
So let's get into what a film tax credit program is. Like, what does that do for the film industry and for the state?
Yeah, so generally speaking, it works like this, where a production company, so Sony or Warner Brothers in this case, would get a tax credit that's equal to a certain percentage of qualified in-state spending, which the legislation usually defines. That includes stuff like construction and building, set production, and also employment, things like that, right? So you can think of it like a cash back on your credit card. So you get money back, right? And so then the company can use that tax credit that they get to pay off their own tax bill. But here's a part that a lot of people often don't realize and kind of gets overlooked, is that these tax credits are transferable. They're called transferable tax credits, which means that the company that receives them can then sell them to a different company if they don't need them. So Sony or Warner Brothers would bring productions, they would get tax credit. They probably wouldn't need all of those tax credits themselves to use on their own tax bill, but then they'd go and sell them to a corporation that could use them. And to get a little more into that, it's reported that nationally, you can sell tax credits for typically like 75 cents to the dollar, which means that the corporation that buys those transferable tax credits also is essentially getting a tax break because they're lessening their own tax burden by buying these tax credits. And that part is not often like publicly recognized, and because it happens on the back end, and it's usually private because tax information is private, right? But to use a real life example, when Nevada passed the original Tesla deal back a decade ago, the state approved a bunch of transferable tax credits as part of that package. And Tesla sold those tax credits to MGM, which used them and essentially got a little bit of a break on their taxes or whatever.
So companies can profit off the tax break as well.
Basically. So so Tesla if the Tesla doesn't need them, if Sony doesn't need them, if Warner Brothers doesn't need them, they sell them. They're getting a little bit more. And also whoever's buying them, which in Nevada is most probably going to be a gaming company, just because they are the biggest taxpayers as a corporation, would also benefit from those. And that's just kind of the program that keeps on giving for the business community, right?
So a film tax credit bill was proposed in the 2023 legislative session, but it failed. Why did it fail?
That bill was introduced about a month before the end of session, which is really late in terms of legislative capacity to be able to fully vet any idea and argue about it and lobby for it and come to consensus and change it. And at the same time, because the last month of the legislature is really often focused on like the budget bills and the really big picture thing. And also in this last legislative session, they were still dealing with the A's stadium bill. So again, that was a heavy lift legislatively, combined with the fact that they also had this film tax credit thing. That was a lot going on all at once. So if you ask the people that are involved now, they will say primarily it happened because of timing. As with any sort of like legislative big ask like this, there's probably a lot of stuff happening on the back end. I think some of these tensions between the fact that there were 2 film studio projects in that one bill, and now going into the 2025 session, they are going to be 2 separate bills, one for each studio, which maybe suggests that there was some tension between having 2 studios in the first place. So we might sort of see that. So it was a lot, and it was a big ask. It was a 19-fold expansion of the program from $10 million in tax credits, where it is currently, to $190 million. That's a huge jump.
Yeah.
They're rumored to have, they've sort of acknowledged that they're going to scale it back to about $100 million in tax credits, which is less than what they were asking, but still a really big expansion of the program.
We need to be talking more about the arts happening on our UNLV campus. I love walking across those beautifully manicured grounds and making a beeline to the magnificent Oldenburg flashlight sculpture by the Performing Arts Center to see great performances. Like on Saturday, September 28th, where a one-night-only dance performance of Body Traffic is happening at 7:30 p.m. Direct from LA, Body Traffic is brimming with stunning performers, technical mastery, and commitment to the most innovative repertoire created by the most in-demand choreographers. It's a cutting-edge dance company taking the stage with compelling works that embody the energy, sophistication, and sheer joy of dance. This program includes pieces based on the music of Etta James, James Brown, and others. Go see what Broadway World is called absolutely joyous and oh so entertaining. Buy your tickets today for Body Traffic at pac.unov.edu.
Immerse yourself in Candy Crush Music Season. Crush the competition for a chance to win 3 epic live music experiences anywhere in the world. Discover the hottest new tracks from Toki Monsta, Kimbra, and Lazewo in-game now. Now that sounds sweet. Click or tap the banner to download Candy Crush and play Music Season now. Start September 19th. Open to players 18 older above level 25 in eligible countries. Prize cap value and terms apply.
The biggest difference is now that it's 2 separate bills. So do you know the differences between the Sony plan and the Warner Brothers plan?
Yeah, so we don't know. None of the draft language has been introduced. We know what the bill said in 2023 when it was proposed. Theoretically, you could sort of take the 2 studios, because within that 2023 bill, there were 2 studio projects that had sort of big separate sections of the legislation, right? So you could separate those 2 and say this is what it might look like. But those bills are being worked on independently, so they're not working together on those bills. There's one, a state senator, Roberta Lang, who worked on this issue last session. She is partnered with Warner Brothers, and she's going to be working on that project. And then Sandra Hardigy, which is an assemblywoman and legislative leader, she's going to be working on the Sony project. So they may develop and have different proposals altogether. We don't know at this point. We won't know until the actual language gets introduced in the 2025 session. But what we do know is that both studio projects are sort of similarly sized. There's a 34-acre campus for Warner Brothers, and there's a 31-acre campus for Sony Studios. The Sony Studios project is sort of attached to a bigger 100-acre development that's for mixed use, but still the studio itself is about 31. They've both thrown out some numbers, but it's hard to tell whether or not how apples to apples those numbers are.
Yeah. Are they competing for the same dollars, or are these 2 totally separate bills and programs?
We don't know what the exact answer to that question is yet. Theoretically, currently in state law, there's one film tax credit program, and anybody can go into those. Anybody can use that program. So everybody is competing for the same $10 million. If the state were to expand the film tax credit program to $100 million, theoretically, everybody would be able to partake in that $100 million. But the way legislation is written, it's typically for something. So like if you looked at the film tax credit bill that was considered in 2023, those film tax credits were tied to a certain location. So it would have been for one of the studios. So theoretically, the legislature could approve tax credit programs for one studio in Summerlin and one studio in the southwest part of Vegas, and they could both get it. They could do one or the other. It's really up to it's up for debate and to be seen.
So there have been some questions about the actual value of a film tax credit program for a state. So there was a study done in Georgia that showed for every dollar the studio spent in their state, really only about 19 cents of it was like going into the state's economy. So have you heard any sort of convincing rebuttals saying that this isn't a good idea or that this is a great idea?
Yeah, so with any numbers, especially in the economic development world, you can sort of spin numbers and look at numbers in a lot of different ways. So when the Sony CEO was asked at a recent economic development event about that particular issue and the poor return on investment that several studies have shown, his answer to that was pretty simple. And he said, if it wasn't working for states, states wouldn't keep doing it. So Georgia keeps doing it. And so that's kind of his argument. And then the deeper argument, if you want to get into some of the numbers, it all depends on what you're considering as part of that development. So I think if you look at the number of jobs and the number of construction and those kinds of things that are a direct result of the studio, then the return on investment is lower. So you're looking at the actual jobs that of the number of full-time employees who are hired and working at a studio, for example, right? But when people like Sony and Warner Brothers come in and when they make their pitches and when they start talking about numbers and their projections are going to include indirect jobs. So their jobs, when they look at their investment, they're saying, we're also going to create jobs indirectly, and they use this very example. This isn't me trying to make it sound bad, but they'll say, we're not just going to hire lighting people and actors, we're also going to have to cater our events, and that's going to create jobs in the catering industry. We're going to create jobs for people who are doing laundry and cleaning sets and hairstylists and all of these type of jobs that already exist in Nevada and in Las Vegas, but could be used by the studio. They consider that in there too. So they say, and the ancillary jobs, the extra jobs that are coming in, they're going to count those numbers, and that can inflate your numbers quite a bit depending on what you decide to include.
Warner Brothers is partnering with UNLV. What is that partnership? Is that a strategy to be like more community minded?
That's certainly what they're selling and an example. So their Warner Brothers project, what we do know of it is that their campus would include a, quote, production and immersive learning facility called the Nevada Media and Technology Lab, which would be designed essentially for workforce development and could be used by UNLV's film department and other departments at UNLV that might have a use for it. And so it is and the Warner Brothers studio, it would be located on a property that's owned by UNLV. So UNLV is a big partner in that project.
Interesting. Okay.
And that's the idea, is that they could help develop it, because both of the film studios have acknowledged that there is a workforce here that they can tap into, but that it's not enough and that they would still need to develop that. And so UNLV's idea is that, hey, we can develop that. We can build our film program. We can build those sort of, production capacity jobs and things or whatever. So that project, that lab, in theory, would help bridge that gap and sort of offer opportunities. On the other side, Sony has said that they will have educational components and they do plan on working with groups, but we haven't seen any specifics about what any program on their end would look like.
So what do you think, April? Do you think Las Vegas should be invested in getting the film industry in our city?
I mean, I'm just a reporter. I'm here for, I think there's
just a simple journalist.
There's a lot of ways to look at it, and the devil is in the details, right? It's a conversation worth having. And I think that economic diversity in Southern Nevada has been a topic for years, if not decades. We need to change something, and we do need to help people grow. Whether or not the film industry is that, I think it is worth contemplating. I don't know that I look at LA and Hollywood as like a bastion for helping lift people out of poverty and stuff. I think I think that's one of the fears I have. I think the idea that what those jobs really look like, because everybody is going to make $70,000, everybody's going to make $100,000 sounds really nice, but if that's only the handful of people who are working for unions on the jobs, but we're really approving this based off of lies about how many more delivery drivers we're going to have and how many more catering and how many more Jimmy John's, lunch catering, that doesn't...
Jimmy John's, specific calls to Jimmy John's. I mean, I'm also curious, too, how much of their labor force are just going to be imported from LA and commuting from LA, right? That
exactly.
Bring jobs here.
I think one of the things that stood out to me was the Sony CEO saying, hey, people in the film industry would really like to work here so that they can go back home. I don't want to be the commuter work environment for another industry. I think that doesn't build community and doesn't maybe help Nevada in the way. I think there's a lot more research and conversation Nevada lawmakers can have also about the cycles of the film industry, because one of the things we know about Southern Nevada is that when we hit times of economic recessions And when times are tough, people don't travel as much and they don't come to Vegas as much. So we're particularly hit hard when it comes to that kinds of stuff. And does the film and television industry work on a similar cycle? I've heard that the answer is no, but I haven't sort of researched and looked at it myself yet. When you looked at COVID hit them hard also because they delayed everything or whatever. COVID is obviously not a norm, we hope. But in times of economic recession, sometimes, like I've been told that movies and films do better because people are staying at home more and they're doing sort of less. They're going to Vegas less, but they're watching other things more. So maybe that helps boost it. But I don't know that it doesn't feel intuitively different enough from some of what we're doing now. So I think that's a conversation worth having. I do know that people think when I talk to people about this issue and when they read my stories and I get emails about it, a lot of people are excited about it. They just think it's cool, which there is a cool factor that we certainly need to consider and that will play a role here. But I'm not sure. I don't know. I think we're very skeptical at the current about corporate giveaways and about tax programs, particularly ones that just keep on giving to other businesses. I think the public appetite for that has reduced, especially considering like the A's Stadium and how much resistance we've seen on that. Even though it passed lawmakers, there was a lot there. And I think that's a conversation worth having. So I don't know. I mean, I'll see. I reserve judgment just like anyone else till we see the final bills and what it looks like and sort of what protections are in place to ensure that the right benchmarks are being met. I do think the idea of UNLV building its program sounds really cool. I'm a UNLV grad myself, so maybe that's a little personal bias there. But I think there's a lot there. But there's also a lot of room for a bunch of rich people getting richer at the expense of Jimmy John caterers.
April, thank you for your insights on this.
Thanks for having me.
That's all for today here on CityCast Las Vegas. If you enjoyed this show and you know Mark Wahlberg, go ahead and send it along to him. We'd love to get him on the show, get his comments on bringing the film industry here. Oh, but if you don't, you could just rate the show and leave us a review, and you should subscribe to our morning newsletter too. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Take care.